Welcome. This is Gutted. Loaves, fishes, and being more than the sum of your parts. I'm Dr. Stacy Marquis, and today we finish our exploration of Season 2, Episode 2 of The Chosen. Its title, I Saw You. Our last episode ended on the morning after Jesus and Philip's late-night conversation. As the camp stirs awake, Philip tells Simon, Andrew, and Thomas that Matthew is responsible for the huge pile of wood, and then suggests that they thank him when they see him. Then, after telling a humorous story about life on the road with John the Baptizer, Philip tells Andrew that not only does John remember him, but that he's proud of him, like a father. Andrew responds exactly the way you would expect, and will spend the rest of the morning grinning like a 10-year-old boy who's just been chosen to hold the class turtle. On the other side of the camp, Mary, still in awe after hearing the men recite prophecy the day before, decides that she and Ramah need to study Torah. They have some catching up to do. But Ramah's hesitant, as she admits that she found the men's recitation a bit intimidating, and even if they could find the materials, she can't read or write. This is a very different Ramah than the one we saw preparing for the wedding at Cana. There, she was in her element, confident, capable, anticipating needs before anyone else even realized they had them. When the wine ran out, she directed the servants to follow Jesus' instructions. When Thomas's anxiety spiked, she was the one who steadied him. And when Jesus called Thomas at the end of the feast, she was the one who told him to stop overthinking and to follow what his heart already knew. Confidence is easier and more natural when you're in an environment where there's a shared language and understanding. Until now, her world has been small and well-contained, revolving almost entirely around her family and the family business. But what they're doing now, following Jesus, it's hard, and she feels insecure. Transitions can strip away the familiar clues that once reminded you of your competence. Now, she's not really sure what she has to offer Jesus or the group. Mary doesn't dismiss her insecurity or try to sidestep it with reassuring platitudes. She meets Ramah right where she is, saying she will teach her how to read and write, and she knows exactly who to ask for the materials. Meanwhile, at the edge of camp, Matthew is sitting under a tree, writing. Thaddeus joins him and, looking down at his notebook, says, "Yeah, he thought this is what he would find him doing." Matthew's immediate response is, "What, hiding?" Thaddeus replies, "No, writing. Wait, is he hiding?" It's like Matthew has just been waiting for someone to ask that question. He might have even primed the pump a little bit. He tells Thaddeus that Philip says he doesn't have to hide anymore. Thaddeus, impressed, says, "The new guy." He likes him already. It's easy to assume that Thaddeus made his way over to Matthew to thank him for the wood, but he was actually praying when Philip gave everyone that update. Thaddeus has a way of drifting toward anyone on the edges, where he offers a steady, quiet kindness. He sits on the ground beside Matthew and, glancing over, asks, "What is he writing?" Matthew, a little uncomfortable with how close Thaddeus is sitting, shifts, ever so slightly. Personal space has probably always been a fragile boundary for Matthew. It's a common experience for people on the spectrum. trying to determine what's too close and what's too far, and how different situations change society's expectations. Matthew says he's taking notes, writing about, well, everything. All the things Jesus says and does, the teachings, the healings, all of it. At first, he says it felt like a chore, but now it's a habit, something he does daily. It's also a coping mechanism. Matthew left a life that was structured and predictable, but that decision didn't change the type of order his mind requires. He needed to adapt and create new routines that ground him and make him feel safe. Because life on the road with Jesus and the others changes very quickly, physically and emotionally. And for someone like Matthew, that can be really dysregulating. Habits that ground us aren't weaknesses, they're adaptations. Simon, walking toward them, overhears Matthew and immediately becomes defensive. Wait, seriously? Every word? Simon worries that writing things down makes them permanent, and permanence attracts attention. He learned a long time ago that survival sometimes depends on staying under the radar. What follows is a sharp exchange between Simon and Matthew about whether truth is safer when it's written down or when carried by others. Simon says they have enemies who would love nothing more than to twist Jesus' words and use them against him, while Matthew maintains that it's harder to twist something if it's written down for all to see. But as often the case, arguments rarely stay in their own lane. When people are stressed or feel threatened, old grievances rise to the top. And beneath Simon's irritation is a much deeper wound. The sense of betrayal he felt when Matthew followed him through the streets, writing down his every move, and then delivered those notes to Quintus. Simon still manages to thank Matthew for the wood, but in a passive-aggressive way, saying, to think he came over to thank him. Matthew finds his voice. He stops writing and, looking Simon directly in the eyes, says, people out there want to define all of them by their pasts, but they do things differently now because of him. Simon is stunned, and for just a moment, he stands silent, not sure what to say. Finally, he settles on, just for the record, it's a bad idea. Write that down. Matthew immediately begins writing, hopefully something about Simon being irrational. As Simon turns to leave, he adds, oh, they leave in an hour. Thaddeus, who sat mostly quiet during the entire exchange, leans in gently and says, Simon's not wrong. Just be careful. It's not judgment, it's concern. Later, on the road to Caesarea Philippi, Simon makes his way from the front of the line to the back, like a cruise director calling out names as he passes. Reaching Philip and Matthew, he says Philip's name, but completely skips over Matthew, who is also actively avoiding eye contact. Reaching Jesus and Andrew, Simon makes a smart remark about Andrew slowing Jesus down, which results in a brotherly banter and a challenge to a foot race. Finally, Andrew leaves, heading up to the front to take his turn with the cart. Jesus looks at Simon. It's weird. He thought Matthew would be in charge of cart assignments. When Simon asks why, Jesus says because Matthew's brain already thinks in divisions, calculations, order. Yeah, Simon replies. He noticed. But since they're on the subject of Matthew, he wants Jesus to know that Matthew is writing down everything he does. Jesus replies, "Of course he is," which is definitely not the response Simon was expecting or hoping for. Then, hearing that Jesus is okay with it, Simon has to begrudgingly strike that grievance off the running list he's keeping of Matthew's offenses. Jesus turns, naming what drives Simon, feeling and instinct. And Simon doesn't deny it, but he adds that he also thinks. He thinks a lot. Given the things we've seen Simon say and do, it's reasonable to deduce that his formative years were likely filled with phrases like, "What were you thinking?" or "You did what?" Those echoes don't disappear with age. They get repurposed. As an adult, Simon channels his restless mental energy into problem solving. Thinking becomes his way of staying ahead of criticism, his own and everyone else's. He tells Jesus that as he sees it, their growing group needs hierarchy. If everyone knows their role, fewer mistakes happen. And that's the goal, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they're all unified behind Jesus. You're all unified, Jesus says, as in, did you just say that out loud? Simon clarifies, okay, well, they all agree on him. Simon adds that some people in the group tend to get hung up on small details, the kind that slow everyone else down. Jesus refuses to dignify that comment by asking who Simon is talking about. Instead, he reframes the problem entirely, saying if Simon feels the group is slowed down by someone else's thoughts or concerns, maybe it's not that they need to speed up, maybe he needs to slow down. Meanwhile, a little further up the road, Mary and Ramah catch up with Matthew, who's walking alone, saying they need a favor. Matthew replies, of course. It's the first time someone has asked him for something. When Mary asks to borrow a tablet, Matthew's hopes are dashed just a little bit. Did Simon put them up to this? No, Mary replies. She and Ramah want to study Torah, and she's going to teach Ramah how to read and write. Matthew's excitement returns. He wants to do the same thing, but none of them know where to start. Matthew says he'll ask Philip. And when Mary asks, why Philip? Matthew explains that, like Thaddeus, Philip is kind to him. Mary, with sadness in her voice, says she's sorry that the others aren't. We see Matthew trying to process her compassion, but unable to find the socially appropriate response, he just says he'll talk to Philip. As Matthew moves up the line to find Philip, Thomas, who was just a few steps behind them, moves forward. He had been watching the entire interaction, and we could tell by his posture that he was feeling some sort of way about it. Trying to sound casually curious, he asks, how are things going? He brightens when Ramah tells him that she and Mary are going to study Torah. But when she adds that Matthew will be joining them, he scoffs, saying, Matthew doesn't know anything about Torah. It's a reflexive jab, the kind jealousy prefers. Jealousy rarely announces itself directly. More often, it's disguised as criticism of someone else's competence or lack thereof. And is typically the case, it comes off as really petty. Thomas and Ramah's attraction has already been quietly established. and Matthew poses no actual threat. But jealousy isn't rational. It's reactive. It shows up the moment someone feels displaced or left out. Feeling caught, Thomas tries a different angle. But Ramah doesn't read or write. And this is where Ramah's shift becomes visible. She began the day unsure and overwhelmed. But now, she reclaims her confidence, saying reading will be the first thing Mary will teach her. There's a pause, the kind that happens when someone realizes the ground they're standing on isn't quite as solid as they thought. Ramah breaks the silence by asking Thomas if he's taken his turn pushing the cart. Mary turns her head slightly, hiding a smile. Growth, apparently, is contagious, and for Thomas, a bit humbling. Up ahead, Matthew asks Philip about a passage to memorize. He wants to make up for lost time. In the way mentors often do, Philip gently reframes the assumption under the request, saying Matthew didn't lose time. It was simply rearranged, and now he's gaining it all back. It's a kind and well-intentioned response, but it's not entirely true. There are seasons in life that cost us something. Circumstances and systems can genuinely steal opportunities, and pretending otherwise risks bypassing very real grief. Time once missed isn't recoverable. What is recoverable is meaning, and what can be reclaimed is presence. Matthew isn't returning to Torah as the boy he once was. He's returning as someone older, sharper, and more deeply invested. His past doesn't disappear. It gets integrated. And in many ways, that makes him more capable now. Not despite what he's lived through, but because of it. Seeing the city up ahead, Philip says, Caesarea Philippi, his namesake. Matthew, in awe, says, Really? Philip laughs. No. He then tells him the actual story of the city. The family drama, how John the Baptizer has criticized the behaviors of its leaders for things like killing their own sons, marrying their own nieces. Matthew's eyes grow wide as he says, I suppose he should. Matthew worked for Rome, but in Capernaum. He was quite a few steps removed from the complexity of the larger world around him. Philip, with a dramatic flair, says, Welcome to the Empire. Then, leaving Matthew with so much new information to process, he tells him he's going to go on ahead. But before leaving, he puts his hand on Matthew's shoulder, saying he will think about what passage Matthew should memorize first. Inside the city proper, Nathaniel lies only half on his bed. He doesn't hear Philip knock or call his name. Philip, worried, climbs through a window and, seeing his friend, rushes over to wake him. What's wrong? Is he sick? Nathaniel sits up, still trying to get his eyes to focus. He says, Philip? Yeah, it's him, Philip says. Why is he still in bed? Is he okay? Nathaniel, looking down, mumbles, Yeah, he's fine. Philip tilts Nathaniel's head up, and seeing his red, puffy eyes, the way he squints at the light, yeah, he needs water because espresso isn't available. As they sit on the floor with their backs against Nathaniel's bed, Nathaniel tells Philip what happened. The cement, the building, the injuries. Philip listens without judgment, then says he is truly sorry for all his friend has endured. Nathaniel, grasping for something that makes the story feel more survivable, says what so many people do in moments like this. It could have been worse. At least no one was killed. That phrase, "it could have been worse," is rarely helpful. It doesn't soothe pain. It minimizes it. It frames real suffering as something unworthy of compassion or attention. And unfortunately, there's no shortage of similar trite platitudes like, "No matter what you've been through, someone else has always been through more." They don't offer perspective. They just redirect the pain away from where it belongs. Instead of creating gratitude, they often create shame, suggesting that grief must earn its place through comparison with that of others. Pain is not a competition, and minimizing it, whether to survive it or to silence it, doesn't make it lighter. It only makes it more lonely to bear. Philip tells Nathaniel he's still proud of him. Nathaniel gives him the face. You know, the one where you scrunch up your nose and mouth, then roll your eyes as under your breath you mutter, "Whatever." But Philip's serious. He tells Nathaniel that at times he's actually lived through him. Not the bureaucracy or the politics, but the simple satisfaction of building something with your own two hands and having the evidence to prove it. He doesn't regret his calling, but while Nathaniel was being validated by people in power, Philip was in the wilderness with John the Baptizer, a place with no records, no markers, no lasting proof, just conviction, heat, and a lot of yelling. And so he admits that sometimes he was even a little bit jealous of what Nathaniel had created. Nathaniel scoffs. "What, a pile of rubble?" Philip doesn't push back. He just reminds him that he doesn't know the long-term effects of his work. Nathaniel is pretty sure he does, saying, "It will be a cold day in Gehenna before Rome hires another Jew to build anything that matters." He's not just talking about his career prospects. He's naming a deeper fear, that his failure confirms a stereotype, that his mistake doesn't just reflect on him, but on his people. Because under Roman rule, individual error isn't really a thing. It's evidence against an entire group. Philip leans back, thoughtful. You know, there was a time when he too thought he knew exactly where God was calling him. Nathaniel pauses, then looks up, saying, "What is he doing here?" The last he knew, he was still out in the wilderness making enemies along with John the Baptizer. Philip laughs. Things have changed. John has sent him to follow a new rabbi. So, yeah, he's about to make even more enemies. Nathaniel, snarky, says, "Philip really knows how to pick them." But Philip doesn't flinch. His intensity is almost palpable as he says, "This new rabbi isn't just anyone." Nathaniel sighs. That's the same thing he said about John. Philip agrees, saying, yeah, and he was right about John. But this is different. This rabbi is the one the baptizer has been preparing them for. Nathaniel, his hangover still evident, just makes a sound. Philip, wanting to be sure he has Nathaniel's full attention, says his name. Nathaniel. As Nathaniel looks up. Philip holds his gaze steady and says with quiet conviction, "He's the one." Nathaniel shakes his head, confused. "The one?" Philip explains, "The one Moses wrote about, the one the prophets promised." The humor drains from Nathaniel's face. "The one?" Philip, unblinking, says it. "Jesus of Nazareth, son of Joseph." Nathaniel laughs. Nazareth. What follows is a familiar rant, sharp, articulate, and cutting. Nazareth is a nothing place, a rocky hill with barely a synagogue, people sleeping under the same roof as their animals. Philip tries to interrupt, but Nathaniel barrels on, mistaking precision for truth. Philip finally gets his attention, saying he needs to stop and to listen. "Why?" Nathaniel asks. "He's just telling it like it is. Why shouldn't he?" Philip answers honestly, "Because he's being mean." Philip knows this part of Nathaniel, the way his clarity can turn cruel when left unchecked. He says, "Just come and see." Nathaniel hesitates, then shakes his head. No. This is where the depth of this friendship becomes evident. Philip says, "What? Are you going to be late for work?" Nathaniel looks up. Wow, that's dark, like really dark. Philip, leaning toward his friend, his voice steady, says, he knows all Nathaniel has ever wanted is to serve God. Now, he has the opportunity to meet the King of Israel. Philip promises him he won't regret it. The room goes silent. Nathaniel studies him. He's never seen Philip speak like this. It's unsettling, even a little frightening. He admits he's still stuck on the Nazareth part. Philip smiles, not defensively, not triumphantly, just patiently. Just come and see. When we next see Philip and Nathaniel, nighttime has already settled in. Jesus steps out of a building and into the street. From down the road, we see Philip as he approaches with Nathaniel at his side. Philip calls out warmly, "Rabbi." And Jesus, looking at the two of them, smiles, saying, "It's a good night." He asks Philip, does he know who's standing beside him? Philip, not catching that it's a rhetorical question, introduces Nathaniel. Jesus fills in the gap. Yes, the truth teller. Nathaniel, taken aback, says, "Excuse me?" Jesus continues, saying that people are often deceptive, that even Israel itself began with Jacob, a deceiver. Nathaniel looks at Philip, who offers no explanation. Turning back to Jesus, a bit defensive, Nathaniel says, "Yes?" Jesus doesn't flinch. He tells Nathaniel that's what sets him apart. He's a true Israelite, one in whom there is no deceit. Philip begins to smile. Nathaniel steps back, unsettled. Then, suspicious, he looks at Philip, asking, "What did he tell him?" Philip, raising his hand, swears he said nothing. Then, with a slight edge in his voice, Nathaniel looks back at Jesus. "How do you know me?" Jesus, his voice deep with emotion, says he knew him long before Philip ever said, "Come and see." Hearing the very phrase Philip said repeatedly, Nathanael instinctively turns toward him. But Jesus calls him back. "Don't look at him. Look at me." He tells Nathanael that when he was alone, in his lowest moment, God did not look away. He saw him there, under the fig tree. The small fragment of composure Nathanael has maintained collapses. His eyes filling with tears, he says, "Rabbi." Jesus, his own tears evident, smiles gently, saying, "There it is." Words began to tumble from Nathanael's mouth. "You are the Son of God, the King of Israel." Philip throws up his hands triumphant. He knew it. Jesus smiles. "That didn't take long." Philip grins, saying, "Nathanael doesn't mess around." Turning to Nathanael, Jesus places his hand on his shoulder and says, "Like Jacob, he will see heaven opened, angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Then, with a flicker of humor, he adds, "That's him, by the way." They laugh. Nathanael says, Yeah, he got that." Jesus smiles, saying, he knows Nathanael likes clarity. The moment is interrupted when Andrew comes running around the corner, apologizing as he goes. John has returned with a message from Syria. As Andrew dives into the story, Simon comes running around the corner. The irony is perfect, considering the earlier conversation on the road, where Andrew challenged Simon to a foot race, and apparently he was right about who would win. Simon passes on the message. People are already gathering. The need is real. Jesus' fame is spreading. The good kind. Andrew suggests rest. They'll need to leave early. Before they leave, Jesus thanks them. Then, turning to Nathanael, he repeats the very words Nathanael prayed under the fig tree. "You wanted to build something." Nathanael nods. "Something that draws the hearts of the people toward God." Nathanael nods again. Jesus smiles. "Can you start tomorrow?" Join me next time, where after a long morning of walking, Jesus spends his entire day healing those who have gathered, and at the camp, tensions erupt and things get real. This is Gutted: Loaves, Fishes, and Being More Than the Sum of Your Parts.